Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Disney Plus WandaVision, episode 4, which was titled We Interrupt This Program. And even though we got a couple questions answered in this episode, they've also threw out a million more questions to us, and I'm so excited to break it all down in this spoiler review. But before we dive into it, as you all can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing, and while you're at it, hit that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It not only helps out the channel, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, let's discuss this fourth episode of WandaVision. Let me know your pros, your cons, your thoughts and theories about what you think is going on in this Westview, and of course what you hope to see in the weeks ahead. And let's have a great discussion about it in the comments. So before I get into the recap, just a friendly reminder that tomorrow we'll be back with our WandaVision recap show, as well as our live MCU weekly news recap show. That is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. It'll be myself and 3 special guests. Those guests will be Leo from Geekly Goods, we have Owen from Owen Loves Comics, and we have Chris from 3C Films. So tune in tomorrow. We'll be breaking down WandaVision episode 4, and we'll be talking about all the news that we got from the MCU as well. Again, that's a live stream tomorrow on this channel, 3 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you all there. So let's get into this recap as the episode opens up. What a way to open up the episode. We don't get the traditional WandaVision intro. We are now in somewhat the present day, or at least a couple days before the events that take place in the show. We get Monica Rambeau and others in the hospital returning from the blimp. And also, too, you'll notice that we got lines from Captain Marvel when she was a little girl. And it makes me wonder if that big celebrity or that big cameo will be from an MCU character, maybe Brie Larson making her way into the show. That would be very interesting. But nonetheless, we see everyone returning from the hospital, panicking. They're coming back from the blimp. People want to call their family members. And it's a really important moment here. We learn from Rhee's doctor, because we learned that her mom's in the hospital, that she's passed away 3 years ago, and Monica's been missing for 2 years. So it makes you wonder, where has Monica been for the last 2 years? Was she in her space program that we'll talk about here in a bit? Was she on a secret mission, secret invasions potentially? Let me know your thoughts on where you think Monica was those last 2 years. But again, a sad moment, because we learned that Marie has passed away. We won't see Letitia Lynch. Maybe we'll get some flashbacks in Captain Marvel 2, but we do find out that she has passed away. But again, let me know where you think Monica was those last 2 years. But cut to, we head to the Sword headquarters, where we see on the big screens people returning to their families from the blimp and all that. But we also introduce the director of Sword by the name of Tyler Hayward. Now, I googled that name because I'm like, that name doesn't sound familiar from the comics, but the only thing that came up was there is a Brian Hayward from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I didn't watch but a couple episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but from the research I did, apparently he was revealed to be a Hydra agent. So again, I don't know if there's a lot of ties to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the MCU regarding this new timeline, not new timeline, but this kind of, having MCU shows versus not really paying attention to the previous shows. But that would be an interesting connection, because I know a lot of people brought up the Hydra soap was something that was actually in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. regarding this soap that can do mind control and things of that nature. So there may be some parallels, there may be some connections, but Tyler was definitely giving me some villainous vibes, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if he is working with Hydra, because we all know there's been a lot of Hydra references in those commercials, which we don't get a commercial this week, which again, obviously we get the what's going on outside of Westview. But again, let me know if we can trust Mr. Tyler, the new director of Sword. But we kind of get this exposition dump, and we'll talk about this here in a bit, but we find out about the astronaut training program, which I think is more foreshadowing for Monica Rambeau getting her powers, and we'll see those powers probably coming to fruition in Captain Marvel 2. We also learned that the trainees are kind of scared coming back from the blimp of going to this program, but again, I think this was foreshadowing of her getting her powers. But we also learn about the name change from Sword, which is different. The actual acronym is different in regards to what Sword stands for in the comics versus the show. But we learned that this iteration of Sword, since time has passed, is they are facing and kind of dealing with nanotech, AI, and they're also dealing with weaponry, and they create things. So you start to think, well, do they create Monica Rambeau to get her powers? Are they creating, again, if Hydra's infiltrating SWORD, are they creating a way of communicating with Super Skrulls? There's a lot to theorize about what SWORD's going on, and again, who's really running SWORD, because we know Hydra, you cut one hand off and two more appear, but let me know your thoughts on this. But again, the biggest thing I took away from this kind of opening sequences is a lot of exposition. Some of it kind of weaved in perfectly. Some of it felt like it was just like a lot of overload, too much kind of explaining things as people are walking in the hallways, explaining what this person does, what we mean, what we do, this stuff of that nature. It worked, but some of it felt, like I said, a lot of exposition dump. But let me know if you all felt that same way. But going back to the recap, we learned that Marie was actually responsible for building SWORD, which makes sense after the events of Captain Marvel. But it made me wonder Nick Fury's connection. Because again, if we go back to Far From Home, we know that Nick Fury was in space, assuming that was SWORD. I wonder why he isn't the director, as well as are there other Skrulls that work within SWORD, that work on the home base, or are they all intergalactical and are they in space with Nick Fury? Let me know your thoughts on that as well. So going back to the recap, we see the news that Monica is being grounded based on Marie's kind of protocols and guidelines. When you go missing, you can't really go to like your normal traditional ways of work, but she now has this mission to go on this missing persons mission in Westview, which then leads us to, we get James Woo, which again, we all kind of theorized, and I made that prediction a couple weeks ago that was him on the radio, which we confirmed that in this episode. But I love the seeing him back in the mix because he now has that card trick. He specializes in that. We learned that in Ant-Man 2, he tried to learn the cards, and we saw Scott taught him that. So I thought that was a nice little Easter egg. But we learned that Mr. Woo has a person in the protective persons program that is missing. So you start to think to yourself, who is this person that was in this program? Is it Agnes? Is it Dottie? Because those people, their pictures weren't on their notification wasn't listed on the SWORD board, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But stick with me with this one theory. What if that person that checked himself into the protective program is Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio? Now stick with me. In the end of Far From Home, we assume that he's dead, but what if he's a master of illusions, he faked his death, checked himself into the FBI, go under this fake alias, I don't know, Ralph maybe, and he's kind of killing two birds with one stone. The FBI thinks he's in New Jersey, he's in Westview, but at the same time, he's trying to get back at Spider-Man. Again, I know that's a wild theory, but it would be really cool if Mysterio, Quentin Beck, aka played by, the great Jake Gyllenhaal, is that one that Jimmy Woo was working for or was in the program. But let me know your thoughts on that, who you think Jimmy Woo had in the program. But nonetheless, we see that the effects of Westview, the people outside of Westview don't even know what Westview is. The town is over 3,892 people, and also they have this selective amnesia, and they don't know what's going on, except for Monica and Woo. They don't have these effects because they theorize they don't have a connection, they don't know anyone there, so that's why they don't have the effects of no, there's a sign that says Westview, but these police officers don't seem to realize that. Very interesting effects of the radiation from what Wanda may have created. But then going back to the recap, we start to put the pieces to the puzzle together. We see that Monica, that was her drone that went into episode 2, where we saw it was in color, and it was like an old school helicopter, which I love those little Easter eggs. And also we see them coming up with the theories of why they don't think that they're able to see the effects that everyone else has in regards to Westview being non-existent. Monica takes it upon herself to touch the portal, which sucks her in, which obviously leads into how she ended up going into Westview. Cut back to another intro to a character we haven't seen since 2013, and that is Darcy Lewis. We haven't seen her since Thor: The Dark World. And I'll say this about Darcy, the character, I like her more so than I've liked her in the 2 Thor films, but she still has those kind of annoying moments to her. And I like what Marvel's doing. Again, bringing in a Jimmy Woo, bringing in a Darcy Lewis, kind of bringing in these characters that we've seen before and kind of reintroducing them to the audience. We get that with Wanda and Vision, kind of reintroducing us to these characters that we've seen them before. But I'll say I enjoyed her more so than I enjoyed her in her 2 films. But nonetheless, she's more mature. She's a little bit more serious. But more importantly, she is a doctor, which makes me go back to who is that one character that Paul Bettany was referring to, that we're going to get a big actor coming to the show. Jane Foster. Will she be making an appearance in this show? They mentioned a lot of radiation. We know that Thor Love and Thunder is coming out next year. They're going with the comic book run where she has cancer, radiation, cancer. I don't know if there's some connections there, but it would be pretty cool if they do kind of plant the seeds to Natalie Portman coming into the show, and somehow this ties into Thor Love and Thunder. But nonetheless, again, the big thing I took away from that conversation when we meet Darcy again was there is radiation that is kind of spreading. So I wonder what the effects of this is. Westview going to kind of expand and go out and people get sucked into this reality? Something to keep an eye out for. But something also that they mentioned was that the radiation coming from this hasn't been seen since the Infinity Gauntlet was snapped. So Mind Stone. We see, if you all have seen the trailers for WandaVision, there's a moment where Wanda's in front of this kind of yellowish stone, what makes me think this is the Mind Stone. Does she have some type of remnants of the Mind Stone? Is she able to warp it back into reality? Very interesting there. Let me know your thoughts on that. But going back to the episode, we see that the B-Man is working for SWORD, and I believe his name was Agent Franklin. I immediately went to Google to see who Agent Franklin was in the comics, and the only thing I was able to find was in the comics, there's a character by the name of Franklin Hall who also goes by the name of Gravadon. Now, he is a supervillain who first appeared in the Avengers 1977. Again, he in the comic run, he worked for AIM, which if you all don't know, AIM was created by Bond von Strucker. AIM can make their way into the MCU. He could be a supervillain or he could be a throwaway character. But again, it's very interesting that the only character I was able to find was a Franklin Hall, who was a secret, or I should say a supervillain that worked for AIM, who was created by Bond von Strucker, who also was created MODOK. So there's a lot of connections to the comics there, but let me know what you all think about that. Going back to the episode, director Howard sees the process that Darcy has made, and they are very surprised because they see the first episode that we saw of WandaVision. I love the meta nature of this episode, that they're watching what we watched and getting their thoughts and opinions on the episode. It's very meta and very cool. But Wu points out that this is a sitcom starring the two Avengers, which I love that line there. And we get other reference to the person that was watching the first episode of WandaVision was Darcy. So again, little Easter eggs explaining some things from the previous episodes. We start to gather the information of who's actually inside, and we learn that these are indeed SWORD agents. And it appears that based on that clipboard that we see there, that all those agents lived in New Jersey. Now, did they all live in that town? Are they dead? It's a lot to theorize there. We learn the name of Mr. and Mr. Hart are Sharon and Todd Davis. And then we get the questions from James Wu in regards to why is it a hexagon shape? Why is it a sitcom? Is this the same time and space? Is Vision alive? And you start to think, okay, the hexagon kind of makes sense. Wanda being a witch, things of that nature. And we see all the little hexes throughout the show. Are we in the same time and space? At this point, people in the MCU, they've seen Thanos, they've seen time travel, quantum realm, so they're just theorizing all the stuff that we're thinking of as well as why is this in the form of a sitcom? All the same questions that we have. James Wu has the same questions, but let me know what you all think about his questions on the board and your thoughts and your theories on all that. But cut to, again, it's really important to notice that they didn't have identifications for Agnes or Dottie, which makes people start to think Agnes being a villain, manipulate the situation, working for Mephisto. Who the hell is Dottie? Is she Mephisto in the form of a female? Is she just disguising herself? It makes you start to theorize all this stuff. Is Dottie the character that was in the protective program? Was it Agnes? There's so much to think about in this moment here. But back to the references, as we see, again, it was Wu whose voice came through of the radio in episode 2. And it was really interesting too. I don't know if you all noticed, but Darcy brings up the words barf when she was referring to Wanda washing the dishes, which makes me start thinking about barf is a acronym in the MCU created by Tony Stark. Is there some type of barf thing going on? Going back to my Mysterio theory, he was kind of a part of barf. I don't know if I'm stretching there, but let me know your thoughts there. Back to the Dottie and the Wanda scene. They don't think that they were able to communicate with them, but we know as the audience that we saw in episode 2 that Wu was able to get in there, but it was like a quick cut. So it makes you think again, what is Dottie's importance in that scene that she was able to be a part of that cut sequence that we only seen with Wanda and Vision in episode 2. So really interesting moment there. Funny, again, watching a sitcom and how Darcy and Wu were entertained. I just love the meta nature of this episode. But again, we go back to an important moment last week where we see Monica Rambeau being kicked out of Westview, and we get it from her point of view in regards to bringing up Ultron and seeing what actually happened. And as Darcy mentions, there's someone censoring the program, it being Wanda, or at least we assume it's Wanda, who might be manipulated by Mephisto or someone else entirely, Agnes, or Agatha, I should say. So going back to that moment again, we see Agent Franklin makes his way into Westview. We don't see what happens to him. We just see Wanda say the no. So again, is he thrown out? We don't see him being thrown out. Is he somewhere else? Is this how he becomes the villain that he is in the comics? If it is Franklin Hall, very interesting there. But going back to easily the best scene of this entire episode, we cut to Wanda from last week talking to Monica. Why are you here? You're not my friend. You're not my neighbor. You're trespassing. And she kicks her out. She pushes her through the wall and pushes her out of the portal. She fixes all this, and she realizes, like, we know now for a fact that Wanda is very aware, or at least we think she's aware of the situation, but is she being manipulated? But again, the most shocking, scariest moment of watching this episode is when Wanda turns around and looks at Vision, and he has the after effects of Thanos poking out the Mind Stone. He's gray. His eyes are gray. Very shocking moment there. But then he comes back into color. We hear Wanda say to him, or he says to Wanda, we can go anywhere you want. And she says, no, this is our home. Don't worry, darling. I have this all under control. Are you under control, Wanda? Mind Stone, Agatha, Mephisto, who knows who's behind all this? Mysterio. But going back to the ending, we see Monica says that it's all Wanda. It's all Wanda. I think that's a smokescreen. I don't think that Wanda is truly the person behind all this. I think she obviously has some knowledge of what's going on, but I don't think she's fully in control of what's actually happening in Westview. As we wrap up the episode, we see Vision again. He's kind of suspicious of the situation. He looks at the camera and or looks at the kids, Billy and Tommy. He kind of looks like, oh, what are we going to watch tonight? He's very self-aware, or at least becoming self-aware that things are not white in Westview. End of the episode. What a lot of stuff. Again, we see all the answers, the questions from the last few weeks. Okay, who are these people in Westview? We find out they're agents from S.W.O.R.D. Are they dead or are they alive? Do they live in Westview? We also find out from Darcy this radiation. Is Jane Foster going to get into the mix? As I had mentioned, my theory about Mysterio might be that person of the protective program. Who do you all think that is? So there's just so many questions that were thrown at us. Is Tyler a villain? Is Franklin Hall going to be a villain? The B-Man, what happened to him? And of course, who's behind all this? Is it Mephisto? Is it Agatha? It's just so many questions. But I really enjoyed this episode nonetheless. Like I said, I thought there was some moments of exposition at the beginning, but I thought it kind of eased itself out. The reintroducing us to James Wu, who I liked his character a lot, and again, the magic trick is he's perfected that with the cards. Darcy Lewis, much more digestible and not as annoying as the first two appearances in Thor. Will we get Jane Foster in the mix? Will we get Captain Marvel in the mix? Will we see Monica Rambeau getting her powers in this show, or will they save that for Captain Marvel 2? So much to theorize. And again, tomorrow, myself, Leo from Geekly Goods, Owen from Owen Likes Comics, and Chris from 3C Films will be breaking it down even further on this channel, 3 p.m. Central Time. I can't wait to talk about it with you all on this channel tomorrow. But again, let me know all your thoughts and theories in the comments below. As always, make sure to like, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other content. Thank you all for watching this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you all on the next video.